What BDS stands for is boycott, divestment, sanctions.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. And it's so people are opposed. If you oppose what's going on in Israel with how they're treating Palestine, a lot of people say that's an apartheid state. I say that here, and when I say that, I'm just repeating what John Kerry said when he was Secretary of State, that it's an apartheid state, and a lot of people say Gaza is an open-air prison, right? So the only way you can fight back at that non-violently is to divest. The same thing they did in South Africa. Was it in the 90s that they divested in the 90s? So South Africa was an apartheid state. I remember when I was growing up, everybody wanted you to divest from don't go to, I ain't gonna play Sun City. Remember that was a song? So it was about people not giving your economic activity to South Africa until they changed their apartheid state. So now people are using that same tactic against Israel, except now Israel's trying to criminalize that behavior here in the United States with the help of United States legislators that are trying to criminalize that. In fact, there was a bill that senators and Democrats signed off on that wanted to make it illegal. So there's been some successes. The ACLU immediately pushed back on that because what that does is that it makes political thoughts crimes. So because if you didn't buy from Israel because of your political feelings about apartheid in Israel, that would be illegal. But if you just didn't buy from Israel and you didn't know anything about it, that's not illegal. So what that does is criminalize thought.
I mean, it's the height of, yeah, it's exactly what free speech is about. I mean, this is a basic First Amendment issue, period.
So you're not criminalizing the action, they're criminalizing the thought behind the action. So you don't have to buy stuff from Israel, but if you don't buy stuff from Israel and you say why, that's a crime. Isn't that something?
That's so strange.
That's what they're trying to do. So the ACLU, this is from their website, in first, judge blocks Kansas law aimed at boycotts of Israel. Okay. The law, which took effect on July 1st, requires that any person or company that contracts with the state submit a written certification that they are, quote, not currently engaged in a boycott of Israel, end quote. The ACLU is also currently fighting a case filed in December against a similar law in Arizona. The ACLU represents Esther Kuntz, who belongs to the Mennonite Church USA. In accordance with calls for boycott made by members of her congregation and her church, Kuntz decided not to buy consumer products made by Israeli companies, and international companies operating in Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. Kuntz participates in this boycott in order to protest the Israeli government's treatment of Palestinians and to pressure the country to change its policies. Having served as a public school math teacher for 9 years, Kuntz now develops her school's math curriculum and trains teachers on how to implement it. She is also qualified to train teachers statewide as a contractor with the Kansas Department of Education's Math and Science Partnerships Program. So she's qualified to do a lot of things. When Kuntz was asked to certify that she does not participate in a boycott of Israel, she said that she could not sign the form in good conscience. As a result, the state refuses to contract with her, and she is unable to participate as a trainer in the state's program. So now if she would have signed that, but still went ahead and boycotted Israel with her money, nobody would have been the wiser. And that's not illegal. You don't have to buy stuff from Israel. But if you publicly state why you're not buying, then that's illegal, or that breaks her contract, making that a thought crime, literally. Again, it's not the action, it's the thought behind the action. The lawsuit argues that the Kansas law violates the First Amendment for several reasons. It compels speech regarding protected political beliefs, associations, and expression, restricts the political expression and association of government contractors, and discriminates against protected expression based on its content and viewpoint. That all seems pretty cut and dry to me.
So straightforward.
So straightforward. Yeah. In his opinion, the U.S. District Judge Daniel Crabtree wrote, the Supreme Court has held that the First Amendment protects the right to participate in a boycott like the one punished by the Kansas law. So, Steve, you're a lawyer. You're trained as a lawyer. It seems really cut and dry.
It's so cut and dry. This is like the most basic tenets of First Amendment principles.
Yeah.
The government cannot restrict speech especially political speech. So there's more allowance for restricting commercial speech. So for example, you can't put up, signage for porn or strippers in certain areas. You can zone that out.
Right.
So that's a restriction on speech, but that's allowable. But for political speech, if you want to restrict that, it has to be a compelling reason as a very, very high bar. Here, there is no stated reason.
Right.
And if the government doesn't allow you to take sides in a political discourse, that's the definition of tyranny and the lack of free speech. The First Amendment, the most important amendment in our Constitution, the basic foundations of a civil and free society. So I don't understand how this law could have ever happened. How is it that in Kansas, the Kansas state legislature felt, you know what we got to do? We can't have people boycott Israel.
In Kansas.
This is the best thing for Kansans or Kansasans, or I don't know what it is.
Kansans.
Yeah, the best thing for people living in Kansas is to prevent people from Kansas from boycotting Israel. What?
Well, you talk about the long arm of APEC, right? That's what that is, right, Steve? That's the Israeli lobby, even working, because I don't know if you know, in Kansas, this is where the Koch brothers decided to target, and they got rid of all the moderate Republicans, and they got Brown back as now we're living in the big, great failed experiment of conservatism in Kansas right now. So that's this is Koch brothers money. This is APEC money.
To me, this is not. I mean, this is really. We talked about it as a BDS movement impacting Israel. That's not what this is about. This is really about free speech issues.
Yeah.
And lobbying and undue influence by special interest groups and actually, foreign countries. So the crazy and ironic thing is that money in politics, in this instance, money from AIPAC or whoever else funded this law, that's considered free speech.
Yeah.
However, speaking in protest against Israel in this instance, not free speech. Right? So it's amazing how money, which is defined in this instance as speech and free speech, and you're un-American if you oppose it, is being used to stifle actual political speech.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this clip. There's a whole hour and a half of aggressive progressives waiting for you at the Young Turks Network. Become a member and get access to all the content.